and welcome to another episode of The Ambassador. I'm your favorite host, Pastor Larry Omodia. As usual, we talk to ambassadors, diplomatic members, people representing the president. As a matter of fact, we talk to presidents outside the presidential palace. Representing the country of Uganda today, it's my pleasure to be sitting close to Her Excellency Miriam, the ambassador of Uganda to the Netherlands, should I say, because we're in the Netherlands. But again, this lady wears so many hats. I can't even count the number of countries she represents. But we'll get to that later on as we proceed with the ambassador. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Yes, and welcome back to The Ambassador. The Ambassador is a show that gives you an insight into the countries, the African countries. We meet with people representing the presidents of their country. You know, in the Netherlands, we have the ambassador of Uganda, who is actually wearing so many hats. She represents the president outside the country. Today, we're going to be speaking with Her Excellency Miriam. We call her Miriam So. Am I correct, Your Excellency?
Black Soul.
Black So. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
As usual, we'd like to know your country, the country you represent, and how did you get here?
Right. It's a long story.
So, well, give us a brief one.
I'll give you the short version of it. Yes. Originally, I'm from the Netherlands. I was born here, I grew up here, finished my law degree, and was posted to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in Nairobi. And there I got in touch with a lot of Ugandans who were fleeing their country at the time from the regime of Milton Obote. And during that time, there were very many high-level Ugandans who were fighting the established government then by having formed the National Resistance Army, and they were fighting a guerrilla war in the bush in Uganda. So I got to know many of them, and at one stage there were lots of problems with Ugandans in Kenya. Some of them were actually kidnapped, and we needed to get into action immediately. I was then what is called protection officer with UNHCR, and of course those ones came to me and said, Miriam, you have to protect us, or yeah, Mrs. Black, you have to protect us because that's what you are for. And if we are going to stay here, we risk also being kidnapped. So I had to immediately get into action and managed to get a few people to be granted asylum in other countries, in Sweden. Some of those who are now the Prime Minister of Uganda, as well as the Minister of Health and the wife of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. She also managed with the children to basically flee to Sweden with our involvement.
Wow.
So when there were peace talks, because there was another change of regime in Uganda, and then President Moi, at that time President of Kenya, called for peace talks and wanted the then guerrilla leader, Museveni, to be joining the peace talks with the new regime, which was held by General Tito Okello. So the peace talks were held in Kenya, and that's the first time when I met the guerrilla leader, Yoweri Museveni, and he asked me to assist and join him in establishing contacts, diplomatic contacts with embassies, etc. And at that time, I was no longer working with the UN. I had started my own consultancy firm, so I was free to do and choose my political color, and always had felt that the National Resistance Army and the National Resistance Movement were the organization or movement or political entity that would make more of a chance to be taking over, and I would feel very confident with that kind of regime. So they then took power on the 25th of January in 1986, and they called me to say, Miriam, we're in Kampala, are you coming? So I said, yes, of course, I'm coming. I would love to see it, Uganda. And so I was asked to arrange for private charter. So we flew out with those those ones who had not yet been sworn into the new government, the Prime Minister, other ministers, and Madame, the First Lady, Janet Museveni. So it was like euphoria when we arrived there. It was fantastic.
But let me retrace from your conversation. You met Museveni when? At what point in your life?
This was in August 1985. He had then been fighting a guerrilla war for more than 4 years. And I had just completed my 3-year term with UNHCR and was still living in
what exactly were you doing with UNHCR at that point?
Myself?
Yes.
I was a protection officer. Protecting refugees and basically doing the interviews to see whether those ones who were seeking asylum with the Kenya government could be granted asylum and could become refugees in Kenya.
At one point, people thought you were a spy for Kenya in your life.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Why would people think you're a spy for Museveni?
Well, of course, there was no doubt that I was close to the NRA, National Resistance Army, and when I was no longer a UN functioning UN diplomat, and I was then in private capacity, assisting a rebel movement, and later on became the established government. And I guess my going up and down to Uganda, knowing that I would have discussions with His Excellency the President and other ministers who were my friends. And so at that time, the relationship with Kenya was somehow cooled down. So there was indeed a problem that every time I've been to Kenya, they said, "Oh, we heard that, yeah. Wow. Intelligence wants to interview you," and I said, "Well, that's not a good sign." Those kind of interviews.
Were you scared at those days? Were you scared back then?
No, I guess when you're young, you are, I think you don't really see the risks, and you don't contemplate, you just live and, do what is the right thing, what you think is the right thing. So I then indeed stopped going to Kenya for about 2 to 3 years, yeah.
You know what, this experience borders down to the experience that the journalists are having in Syria these days and Libya. You are there doing something positive to help people, but some locals and some people are quick to misjudge your intention. Would you say that actually describes your experience?
Yeah, but this was more at high political level, I think, than just the civilians who, I don't think that those ones who knew me were not worried about me, and but I would get the feedback from others higher up that, and there was a problem. I wanted to renew my work permit and they wouldn't give it to me.
Wow.
So I then realized, yes, there may be a bigger problem than that.
That you thought.
So I decided to voluntarily withdraw. Not to be perhaps PNG'd, persona non grata from Kenya.
Yes.
And of course, later on, when the relationship again,
things smoothened
out, I managed to go back to Kenya.
Your Excellency, you're sitting here representing Uganda.
Right.
Uganda is in Africa. Outside of South Africa, I don't think or know of any country where a Caucasian or white person per se represents or sits at the realm of authority representing Africa. So the question that I think everyone, the crew and the world probably have asked you, what is a white woman doing representing a black country? Could you tell us how you got here and how bona fide your position is?
Thank you for that. I guess in Uganda we're a little bit colorblind, that kind of racism, black, white. I think what matters is where your heart lies. My heart is as red as any of you, I suppose. And,
you mean the blood?
The blood, yes. And so the color outside is, I think, immaterial. It's cosmetic. And luckily, I feel very much at home in Uganda. I have, with open arms, been adopted by all my friends who knew that I was, I was trying to assist as much as possible in the time of need, and when you know that there are people there out for you when everybody is shying away to give assistance or whatever. I guess it matters when you are in dire need of assistance of somebody who helps you. Then it's very much appreciated. And I felt I did the right thing by helping and assisting them in trying to get out of Kenya. I even had to take up some people in my own house for one night in order for them not to be
But
risking.
have you really been challenged by your peers in the diplomatic corps or even back in Uganda because of the color of your skin? Have you really had any outburst or anybody say to you, "Hey, you're Caucasian, you're Netherlands, what are you doing representing us in government?"
No, let me say, first of all, I'm very proud of being a Ugandan. I revoked my Dutch nationality. So I only have one nationality. At the time, the constitution wouldn't allow for us to have two nationalities. So I was, of course, a bit hesitant to do so because we were changing the law in any case. But I said, no, once you have been asked, and requested to be taking up such a very high position, if you say A, you should say B. So I can't be having two nationalities when it's not allowed, and I wouldn't like to breach the constitution of Uganda. So I gave up the nationality and became a Ugandan. And it's a fantastic job to represent the country that I love so much, that I have been living in for several decades, that I've been involved in for the last 32 years. So when the president asked me whether I wanted to represent him, I felt more than honored. You can imagine, indeed, being an outsider. I would say in Uganda, it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, yellow, blue, red, or whatever. I think we are not so mindful of color. And I think people who know a little bit of the history, they know that I have been a Ugandan for a long time. I was married to Ugandan. My late husband, was the first Minister of State for Defense, who also fought the guerrilla war in the Bush War. He was the first medical doctor to join the war, Dr. Ronald Bata. So I think all the history, the younger generation may not know, but those ones who know, they know where my heart lies, what I've been fighting for, and that is what counts, I think. And knowing the country inside out, being posted and being accredited to the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg. The languages that I speak, French, Dutch, German, and English, helps me as well in order to do and carry out my job here. So
you speak Ugandan language as well?
No, not much. Greetings and a bit of
okay.
Kiswahili, which is the African language in our area. But some of the greetings and so forth. It's very difficult. We speak 34 languages in Uganda.
Wow. So you don't have a national language that is
English.
English is your okay. So you're good then.
Luganda is the most spoken language, most widely spoken language is in the center, in Kampala, the capital. But so many languages that you go to certain areas and there will be a different language. So it's.
But Your Excellency, opponents of Museveni, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say to them, we are living in a country that has a democratically elected government. And it's sometimes difficult for those ones who have been losing, to be admitting that they were not the most popular one. And that counts, of course, for Colonel Besigye, who I know very well myself. He also was one of the Bush veterans. He was the second doctor to join the Bush War.
Right.
So we know each other very well. And luckily, he's still out in Uganda. And sometimes we meet. When he came a couple of years ago to the Netherlands, we met. I mean, I believe when you're living in a democracy, you have to be able to learn to accept that democracy is the majority of those ones who have been elected who actually take power.
Right, but Your Excellency, my point is people like Colin Mande, they actually come to the Netherlands and try to raise supporters.
Yes,
they have conferences. They've gone to as far as attending to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, trying to get support to oust Museveni.
Yeah. Well,
do you think that they really have any basis for what they're doing?
I don't think so, but it's not up to me to say that. Yes, as a Ugandan citizen, I can say that. They don't have the right to do so.
Okay.
Because if you are accepting a democratically elected government, a democratically elected leader as well as parliament, then you shouldn't have the right, or you have the right, yes, if you wish to do so, but you don't have the right under a system like that to now start basically opposing that very government. You need to convince the people of Uganda that you are supposed to be the leader that needs to rule the country. And as long as you don't have that majority, I'm sorry, you don't have a right to rule, and you shouldn't take a right by force, the right to power by force, either. So. Yes, I mean, I don't know. It's difficult with African countries, I think, to deal with democracies, because I personally feel that we rule the country, well, I mean, the president and the government, for 19 years with a no-party state. We were forced by Western governments, basically, to give up that no-party state type of forum, whereby everybody belonged to the movement automatically. And yeah, there were no political parties, because political parties were based on religion, on the areas, on tribes, on whatever. And that actually has divided the country so much in the past. That's why we got into all the turmoil and basically anarchy that we actually had in Uganda. So really, that is what we needed to avoid when the president tried to build a country based on unity. And you should not have political parties based on old, diversional mechanisms.
But if I were to say that what Museveni himself is doing could support what those opponents are it sort of helps them to fuel their greed or their ambition. When you pass a law against homosexuals, what would you say about that? How could a president just pass into law against homosexuals? Well, what's your take on that? Because I believe people like Mande and Besiji, they tend to fall towards those type of loopholes or mistakes to fuel their ambition.
Do you think it's a mistake to pass a law against homosexuality? Really? I mean, Nigeria, another country that passed similar laws, even more forceful than the ones we have passed. Anyway, that law, as we speak, is not a law that is functional. It's a law that has actually been repealed or became invalid because of a recent decision by the Constitutional Court, that the decision that was reached in Parliament was not based on a majority of the members present in Parliament. So the law is null and void as we speak. I know that there have been attempts to start in the government, in the Parliament again, to discuss it, bring it up on the order of business. We have to see what happens. I cannot preempt or even think of what the Parliament is going to do. But I think that, as I said before, we have a democratically elected government. Right. Parliament, members of Parliament were democratically elected, with observers from the EU, from everywhere, to see whether it was free and fair. It was declared free and fair. So what right do other governments have for us as a sovereign state, and for those to actually have passed a law that is not to the liking of certain states, when that law is passed in a democratic manner? You cannot just say because you don't like a certain law or because the law is outdated or outlawed in other countries. You see, for us, we are still living in a quite a conservative type of community. That I do agree. There's no doubt about it. That is what I sometimes say to the Dutch government, where I have been also giving some interviews on radio, is that you find it very easy and convenient to forget your past. But when I was growing up as a girl in this country, as a teenager
in the
Netherlands, I did not find people of the same sex kissing in the streets or holding hands or openly displaying their affection for one another. And this is exactly the same reasons that were then given for being anti-homosexual, like everybody was. It's against the Bible, it's against nature, opposite sex are there to procreate, etc., is something that we're still living with us as we speak nowadays. So I believe that because here people seem to have in the Western country seen the light of, homosexuals are different, and this or that or whatever is something that for us we have not yet accepted it. And you see.
But do you think Africa is ready to accept homosexuality?
At the moment, no. There are 37 countries that have anti-homosexual laws in Africa out of the 54 countries. And in the world, I think it's 87 countries, not only, that's outside Africa as well, that have anti-homosexual laws. Now, what is actually the reason that this law was adopted, and I think that's more important to talk about it, is there were a lot of children that had fallen victim. Yeah? Children that have been lured into these kind of homosexual practices.
In Uganda?
In Uganda. And there were people who were going to schools and starting to lobby and say homosexual rights. If you feel different, you can do it. And there's no reason to be ashamed. For us, that goes against our tradition. And I tell you, African culture, for that matter, is different. Because I cannot, with my husband, openly give him a kiss in public in Africa. You don't do that. I don't hold hands with my husband in public. People in Africa do not show their affection for one another publicly. So if a heterosexual couple cannot do that, let alone that a homosexual couple can do that, because it's just not accepted. If you have these kind of intimacies, do it in the privacy of your bedroom. But don't, even in front of the children. That is not done in our African culture. You're an African yourself. You know it very well that these are taboos. And if we want to break through these taboos, it will need time and we are not ready for this.
Talking about time. The way Africa governs itself compared to the Western governance.
Right.
The last meeting we had, you gave me an insight into the stage where Africa is. Do you think that Western cultures are forcing their way of life on Africa? Mm-hmm. Do you think that's the case, or what would you say about the governance of Africa compared to the Western governance? Are we ripe for democracy? Mm-hmm. Do we need democracy? Because our dictators are falling. Hussein is gone. Gaddafi is gone. Well, sorry that I use the word dictators, but at least they portrayed dictators. Mm-hmm. Do you think we need people like Hussein, Gaddafi, Museveni, or even Abacha?
Don't put Museveni in the same line as others, because those ones you were talking of were not democratically elected.
Okay.
Yes? So I don't want my president to be in that category. He has been a democratically elected president, even one with more percentage in the last elections than ever before. So what are we talking about? Now, coming back to what I stated earlier, for 19 years after President Museveni took over power in 1986, we had a no-party state. We then had, a referendum to ask whether we should actually have a no-party state or a multi-party system. And that system was really enforced on us by Western governments. They said, no, what you're doing is wrong. Democracy is based on political parties, and for them the right to express themselves in that way. If they believe they're Christian, they believe they're communist, they believe whatever, they should be able to do that. I think in Africa we're not ready for that. We are not ready for that.
We're not ready for democracy.
Not the democracy that is a blueprint of the Western type of democracy. And that is what the West wanted us to do. They said, oh, if you don't have this referendum, you don't have your multi-party system, we shall stop giving you aid. That is what happened eventually. But the multi-party system was working fine. Like when I lived in Entebbe, we had a system of resistance council that is at a municipal level, village level, and then you have certain tiers up to a higher level. And then you could just be chosen, even if you're non-African, just for the fact I was a non-African, white, I was living there, they wanted to choose me in the local council, the lowest level local council, won. I said, no, let me not do that because my husband is in politics. He was one of those ministers and fighters. So I said, one person in politics is enough. But the fact that you can be chosen, up to a certain level as a non-Ugandan, just because of what you stand for, your principles or your rights, without necessarily having a political party that you vote for, is a very fair system. It's a very fair system because in our African societies, as you know, you choose the person you know because you knew his father, his grandfather, or your great-grandfathers were friends or relatives or whatever. And that's the person you choose because you feel confident that that person can lead you in the right direction. And therefore, the basis of political parties in Africa is a new phenomenon. They don't know it. And it's alien. Why can't I choose the person that I know from this village or from that one? That's the person I want to vote for.
True.
Now, if you have political parties, it goes onto a list, and you eventually, when you choose that party, you will be electing a leader that you don't know. And I think it's too far from us. As Africa, we live in a very still rural setting, whereby we say, I know you, you know me, I went to school with your dad, or whatever.
So, if an African country refuses to go the way a Western government influence is dictating, there's always the issue of you don't get AIDS, we're not going to support you, we're not going to give you AIDS. As an African yourself, and a naturalized African, you've seen the best of both worlds. What is your advice to African countries with regards to the ability to depend on itself without subsidies and grants and aids from the Western world? Do you have a advice or plan that African leaders should follow to deviate from grants? That is, if you think we should deviate from grants.
Oh yeah, definitely. That is, it's unfortunately not yet the time, because a country like Uganda, I think for 75%, when President Museveni took over, we were relying in our budget on grants, on subsidies, on aid, foreign aid, donor subsidies and donor grants. Now that has changed, I think for just about 20% at the moment, our budget is still depending on 19 or 20% depending on foreign aid. But that has to change, and we said it about 15 years ago. It should be trade instead of aid, because trade is where the whole country advances, because that means you are expanding your economy. And if people are earning money and they are employed, they can pay their taxes. So that is how you are going to actually fight poverty. But if you're just living on grants and aid, you can never fight poverty. You have to make people to become full workable citizens, people who are having an employment and feel great in working towards an economic achievement, of living a lifestyle that is better than they have had so far. So you can only do that by learning to stand on your own feet. So I'm glad we are going to oust all this aid. Still we need aid, but as long as it actually benefits trade. So we need aid in order, for instance, for our infrastructure. We need more energy, we need more roads, we need the railway system. Because if you are milking your cows and you can't sell the milk in certain areas because the roads are not passable,
because there's a
then
war.
then you have to still feed the milk back to the cows, or you throw it in the earth. And that is what used to happen in the past. So you need the aid towards the trade development. And that is why we, at the moment, we are, as ambassadors, we are no longer these old ambassadors that drinking champagne and discussing a few. No, indeed, we have made a transition from the traditional type of ambassador, where the word commerce was a dirty word, to now become commercial diplomats.
Your commercial diplomat.
And really, our first objective and goal is to be able to attract more investments, because, like say, we have good workforce, we have good land, very fertile land in Uganda. It's probably the most fertile country in the whole of Africa, with the beautiful wildlife, etc. So we need people to come in with their technology, with their capital. But what we can offer is what I've said. So if we can do these joint ventures between foreigners who wish to come in, foreign direct investments, you can take your dividends out of the country. You don't need to leave anything behind. So people are free to come in and invest. And I think Africa is really offering the future for all those ones who are in the West, in the global crisis, should actually come to Africa.
So let's look at that. Part of you being a commercial diplomat, if we look at the three-nation visa or East Africa visa,
right,
I think that explains part of what your objectives are as ambassadors. So we're sitting here today in the Netherlands, where shortly after this interview, we're going to go to the launching of the East Africa visa in the Netherlands.
Right.
Perhaps this is a good opportunity for you to enlighten us on why you felt there was a need for this East African visa. What does it really mean?
Okay. Well, that, to be in short, an East Africa tourist visa means that any person traveling to Kenya, Uganda, or Rwanda can now get one visa valid for the three countries. So in the past, you needed a visa for Kenya, you need a visa for Uganda and for Rwanda, and if you were going back by road, you would need a visa again to go back. So that one, I think, is a big advantage for those travelers who are wishing to visit and see the beauty of the three nations, to be able to do that with one single visa that is valid for a period of 3 months, and then they can go through the three countries as many times as they want.
What is the benefit for Uganda in this project?
But I think, you see, when we want to be a major player in international global world, in our global economy, that the only way for certain poor African countries is to integrate together. So I want to go back, because the East African Union, which was established in 1967 between Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, the three countries, we had no borders, we had one currency, we had one visa, one passport, we had one railway, East African Railways, East African Airways, one bank. We had everything for the East African Union together. Now that, unfortunately, still very unfortunate, that it broke up because of political differences between the leaders, and sad to say that one of those leaders was Idi Amin, who has since passed. But what happened is, then when you break up the community, the countries now started developing at a different level. Kenya grew very fast. We were in our, and the various governments and very bad leadership that actually brought us down to our knees in terms of economic development. Whereas Uganda was the best country economic terms in the East African Union. So it took us 23 years then to now form the East African Community, which was in the year 2000. And the first thing we wanted to do is to break away the borders for our customs, so that, we are landlocked country. We have no harbor, Uganda, so we rely heavily on what comes from Mombasa, from Kenya, or sometimes Tanzania. And so we need to break down the system of our documentation. Sometimes our trucks were standing at the borders for 3-4 days before paperwork was actually handled. So that one we are doing away with. We have the customs union now. There's still some tariffs, but the tariffs are slowly phased out, so that we have a free customs union. And we already have an East African Legislative Assembly, which is a parliament. We have the East African Court of Justice, and we are also going to go through, hopefully in the future, the East African Federation, so that we have a further even political integration of the countries.
This East African.
Now, what happened?
Go ahead.
What happened is, we had three countries, as I said, and recently, a few years ago, we were joined by Rwanda and Burundi. So what happened? We said we have to come to one visa arrangements for our visitors. We want to make it easier for them to come to our countries. And we also going in the future to one passport for the East African community, so that we can, we're already traveling freely. We don't need visas anymore amongst the 5 countries. And for the East African visa, we were ready. Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda were ready to go. But of course, I think we are all expecting Burundi and Tanzania to join, so that the visitors can also go to that country without requiring a separate visa again. So our political federation is something that is a future detail, but we have approximately 150 million people living in the East African community at the moment, and it's really the way to go. Because if you're going to want to be an economic force to reckon with, each little country in Africa, especially the least developed countries like ones like us, will not manage to stand, in against these rich Western countries. And even the European Union, for instance, is now 28 members. So really, if you want to form a formidable force, or economic force to reckon with, you really have to have that kind of economic integration, followed later on by a political federation, if we can achieve that.
The East Africa visa is going to be launched today.
Yes.
Probably in the next 30 minutes or so.
Correct.
I'm Dutch. I'm British.
You don't look it.
No. But I'm trying to be like you now.
Yes.
I'm trying to be
You
like
know
you.
what they tell me all the time.
I'm gonna be like you. Maybe I'll be the ambassador of the Netherlands
Yeah.
to Kenya or
Yeah,
somewhere.
well, we are all global citizens. That's what I
Amen.
wanted to say.
But what I'm really trying to get at is, if you could help us with 3 advantages to a Dutch or German or Belgian who is applying for visa to go to East Africa?
Yes.
What if you could give us 3 or 5 pointers why this East Africa visa is essential to foreigners?
Well, it's a tourist visa in principle, right?
Okay.
So we'd like to attract tourism. Let's
That's the
be
basis.
clear.
Okay.
It's a tourist visa. And of course, I don't know whether you've ever been, but we are having fantastic countries that are really worth visiting. And so we would like to attract the visitors and make it easy for them to come to our country. So if you want to go to Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, at the moment, you need to go to the 3 embassies and get a visa. But with the launch of the East African Community Tourist Visa, you only get 1 visa. And of course, it's much cheaper because you used to pay 50 euros for each country, and now you pay $100 for the 3 countries.
You go to all 3
It's
countries.
80 euros. Yeah, you pay for the 3
Is this
countries.
multiple entry visa?
Yeah, multiple entry for 3
Wow.
for 3
3
months.
years? Oh, 3 months. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I thought
Well,
you were going to say
most-
3 years.
Then you're living there, you need another type of visa,
Okay.
or you're an investor, you're welcome. But of course, people need to touch, smell, hear the country, the sounds before they start maybe becoming investors. So tourism, maybe that's where it starts. Then you get to know, the country, the people, and you know how warm and welcome Africans are. So you're going to love it, and that is the reason why, we would like to basically promote the visits of any foreigner to come to the 3 countries, and hopefully there will be soon more. The East African community, we hope, is even going to expand beyond the 5 countries, maybe,
So
other
now we have 5
countries in the
countries?
neighborhood.
Well,
At the moment there are 5 countries,
But
but
how
for
many-
the East African visa, at the moment it's still 3, because we were ready and we did not want to postpone it. But as I said, we hope that
and
Burundi
you're waiting
and
for Burundi
Tanzania
and Tanzania?
will follow suit. I
Well,
am
could
sure.
you tell us the delay in Burundi and Tanzania?
No. I think I am not so much aware, but economic and administratively they were not ready. So that decision will be made at a later stage. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm sorry that I don't
No,
be
no.
able at the moment to also launch that, but that will be.
So
a future
primarily,
date.
this is a tourist visa to attract visitors to the
Yes.
3 countries or 3
Correct.
nations in Africa.
Mhm.
Your Excellency, your family in the Netherlands, what they think about you when you change your nationality to Uganda?
Well, I guess. They even thought me living in Africa was
Crazy?
maybe crazy, and what is a young lawyer doing there? And but I guess they have been visiting me many times. First when I was living in Kenya, and then in Uganda, and they've come to love the country as much as I do. I have sister and brothers that would have maybe even liked to have joined me. It's a lovely, lovely place, and I guess.
Would you like to retire in Uganda?
Yeah, fortunately. I hope so.
Uganda.
Yes, definitely. I would love that. So, I guess family, I'm still their daughter or their sister or whatever, so it doesn't make so much difference.
You look so beautiful in your African attire. I want the male version of what you're wearing.
I thought you should have many being.
No, I have a few, but not this quality.
Okay.
This is what we call Guinea brocade in Nigeria.
I see. Okay.
And this looks good
Yes.
on me. So
So what I always say is, if you don't look African, at least dress like one.
oh, that's nice. I like that. If you don't
So,
look like African, dress like African.
one.
At least that way you're covered.
Yeah.
So, you represent how many countries or nations in Europe?
Yes, I'm accredited to the Netherlands, to the Benelux countries. Those are Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and the European Union. But I'm based in Brussels now.
Because of the European Union factor, I suppose.
Yes.
And what does that mean? What does that mean? You're like the president of 3 countries.
No, not president. The face of Uganda, maybe, but not the president. No, we represent the president, obviously.
That's
the
what I mean.
president is the one who gives the letters of credence to each of the heads of state. So that one is very important, and I hope to do that to the best of my ability to represent Uganda It's a wonderful opportunity, and I am very proud of that. So it is a lot of work, yes, definitely. Being in 3 countries plus the European Union is not an easy task, but we still have a lot of dealings with the European Union. So
Are
it
you
takes,
permanent representative, or do you change? Are you going to be removed in 4 years or 5 years? I hear diplomats move every
yes.
4 years or something like that.
Well, actually, I was for 9 years based as the deputy head of mission in The Hague because we don't have yet an embassy in the Netherlands. So I then, the president appointed me to become the head of mission in Brussels. So it means I'm still going
So
up and down. But we have, of course, in the Netherlands, as you know, we have the ICC, we have the International Court of Justice, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, the OPCW,
Are you representative
CFC,
at OPCW?
the CTA. So we have so many. Yes, also represent OPCW. So it's a huge task. It really warrants us having an embassy.
Do you get any sleep at all?
Yeah, I have to.
I have to tell you something.
Yes, tell me.
I have never. We've had several episodes of this, The Ambassador, and
Yes.
in my business, I visit ambassadors for a living, finding out what to tell or what to write in the stories. You served us tea. You served us water. You brought it to our table when we came to visit you. And you had a secretary sitting there. And I'm a CEO of a TV station. And they bring my food to my table, and they bring my
lucky.
water.
Maybe.
But how does an ambassador get to serve tea and coffee? Huh? What's with that? How did you get to do that?
I guess, first of all, maybe still my upbringing was partly Dutch. We did not live with the staff, or helpers or domestic servants. And secondly, I guess, being a representative of a least developed country, as Uganda still is, we are always having constraints with our budget. So I would love to have somebody serving my tea.
You were serving us, and your secretary
but
was
I would
there.
love to. Well, my secretary she's a secretary, but she's not really there to serve tea.
Really?
Yeah, that needs to be done by other people.
Maybe we should let your colleagues hear that. Secretaries are not there to serve tea.
Oh, they're supposed to write letters and answer telephones and. Well, I normally, I like to serve you myself because then I have to call her in and then So no, it's okay. I'm used to that.
We thought that was pretty humble, but is it something? Is it a Dutch thing or white thing or?
Well, you just be practical. I think no, it has nothing to do perhaps with.
If I go to
it's
Mark
just
Rutte's,
practical.
if I go to Mark Rutte's office, is he going to serve me tea?
I don't know.
Mr. Prime Minister, the next interview, you're going to serve Aftv tea, a coffee.
I've seen others do serve tea.
Really?
Even when I go to other ambassadors and colleagues who do serve tea to me themselves. So just be practical. Those sort of things are not very important. I think the work we do and what we stand for, making Uganda to be understood by the larger public in the work we are doing and the objectives we have in mind for the betterment of our people and the Ugandan people is the most important aspect.
That's kind of you. As part of your agenda objectives, being the ambassador, what influence do you say your office have on the Ugandans in your 3 nations? What have you been able to impact, or what have you been able to do for Ugandans since taking office? Or what would you like to be remembered for?
Well, when I came here to live in the Netherlands in 2003, there was just an organization in the Netherlands that was starting up called the Pearl of Africa. You may have heard of them.
The name Pearl of Africa.
Yeah, there's Mr. Ali Balunywa who became the first chairman. Mm-hmm. Now, these people in the beginning didn't want to talk to me.
The white fact.
They didn't want to talk to me and said, no, ambassadors and all these diplomats, you are spies of your government. You're only coming here to find out what we are doing. Because they were purportedly anti-government. And of course, a large group of those ones who were here belonged to Kizza Besigye. And I know their history. I knew many of them, even personally. So I said, but listen, I'm a new type of ambassador. Part of my mandate is to be in contact with the Ugandans in the diaspora. And I am the one here to try and have the dialogue with you. Because that's part of a democracy. You know,
True.
you don't stop talking to one another because you have a different political view, or you become a political a refugee somewhere else. I said, what I don't want to know is what your status is. Are you an asylum seeker, an economic migrant, a student, married to a Dutch, or whatever, a political refugee? I don't want to know. I want to talk to you as a Ugandan. So if you have any problems with Uganda, we all have Uganda at heart. So let that be the first objective. And as a matter of fact, I think one of my achievements is that in that community, I've managed many to come back to Uganda, who are now, like Ali Banyunywa himself is regularly in Uganda. In fact, most of the time he's in Uganda. So, you know, I actually managed to allay some of their fears that when they come back to Uganda, they will be arrested, they will be picked up or whatever. It's not true. We live in a democratic society. I mean, even Dr. Besigye may have problems, but he's still living in Uganda, as far as I know.
Yeah, but he's beaten and arrested every now and then.
He should also comply with the regulations. You can't also, as a Dutch, not hold any rally somewhere without getting a permit. And you can't want to hold your rally in the center of town and putting people's lives at risk and livelihoods. You know how the African markets are organized. Yeah. And if there is something to loot, people will come in and you have a problem. You have chaos. Now, to create chaos, no. You have your political views. Do it in a manner whereby, you know, those views can be expressed, but in a dedicated area, not in an area in the center of town where you want to hold it. So that is our problem. You have to obey the laws. You are now become a Dutch citizen. You obey the Dutch laws. So I think that is fairly clear. So don't worry about that. But I think what my task is to have that dialogue with the diaspora is, of course, to make them aware. Many of them have been living here for a long time, have very wrong ideas about Uganda. I took them to the little places in Amsterdam, in the Bijlmer and others, with the vice president, with many ministers, with members of parliament, and made them to talk to the communities. And in order to let them know that what they have learned, what they have heard on rumors, on what, is not at all a reality in Uganda. And I think that, you know, managed to persuade a lot of them to say, let us try and go back, because home is home. So this is the reason why I don't want them to be deprived from their countries.
Every ambassador always talks about home is home and sending the people back home and let the people. Is this sort of a mandate from the presidency?
No, not at all. Not at all.
So why is it that every ambassador wants people to come back?
No. Let them be out there. It's those ones who say they have a problem politically that they can't come back. I said, no, we are living in a free society, come back. That's why some of them actually are now working or going in and out all the time. But if those ones who are earning money and even wanting to subsidize and send money back for school fees, for building a house, whatever, please let them.
So you don't have a problem.
We don't have a problem because
your citizens
actually
living abroad.
Not at all.
Oh, You're the first ambassador to tell me this.
No, we would like them to, because they make a contribution to our economic development.
Of course, that's always been my problem.
This is what we call what do they call it? Unrequited funds or something, that are funds that are not accounted for, but are coming into the country as foreign exchange, and it has now overtaken our coffee earnings, which was
you mean
remittances by diaspora.
Overtakes your coffee?
Yes.
You're kidding.
So no, but in many least developed countries, at least it is the case. So we actually enjoy, the benefits.
So would you send some more Ugandans abroad so they can send money home?
But if people want to stay abroad because they have a job there, or they still make a contribution to the economy. And this is what I wanted to tell them as well. Instead of sending back these funds and paying the school fees, paying this, paying that, why don't they start a small cottage industry?
Yes.
You know, you want to have your family drying mangoes. Buy them a drying machine. They can do it in the garage, in a little shed or whatever.
Engage them in
business. You make them to be self-sustaining in the long run, whereby you don't have to necessarily let them rely on your monthly remittances. You make them self-sustaining. And that in the long run is much, much better. And this is how the big Asian tiger countries grew, is by all the small little cottage industries. So I wanted to encourage them to say, listen, go and help your families by making an investment there, whereby you can let them earn their own money, and then you can be the one where they live up to these, if they comply with these regulations, then send the dried mangoes in little sachets and sell it in the Netherlands. They are lovely. So that is what I wanted to say.
Our time is up on this episode, and I think you and I could just sit here and talk for hours.
Of course.
Yeah, I love your contribution, your knowledge, and your experience and advice. What would you like to say to viewers of African television about increasing business in Uganda, or showing the beauty of Uganda? Do you have any last comments for us about the beauty of Uganda?
Thank you very much. Uganda has been known as the Pearl of Africa, as Sir Winston Churchill wrote in his book, Journey Through Africa. Indeed, I'm convinced. I've traveled all around the world. It has the best climate, the most fertile ones. We have plenty of water. We have wonderful people. They're well educated. And we just need to get out of our poverty by enlarging our economy. So that doesn't only apply to Uganda, it applies to many other African countries. And I've always said in many of my presentations and whenever I speak, is the 21st century is the century for Africa.
Amen.
People do not know the untapped resources that Africa has. And it's not only the coffee and the tea, but, and the minerals that everybody's fighting over in Africa. But, Africa is very rich. The people are rich. The culture is rich. So really, it's worth investing in Africa. And it's worth that some people say, oh, it's risky to do this in Africa. And there are many countries now. You see Nigeria growing like a tiger out, in the sky out there. And there are many other African countries who will follow suit. And it's only the investors who need to overcome their hesitance now. I'm very sorry that we talk about Ebola, for instance, which certain countries now will not have visitors coming there. And that's a very sad development. But I think we shall be managing to contain it. And I think more and more companies and more international companies will come to realize that if they want to earn money, they have to come to Africa.
Is Uganda actually the third fastest growing economy in Africa?
Well, I don't know the actual figures at the moment, but it could be one of... Yeah, we have had a average percentage of about 5.7, even had timings of 10% growth. So it's doing extremely well. And we've also found oil.
In Uganda?
In Uganda, yes.
Well, would you please reserve my land and lot in Uganda? I think you're going
Luckily, we have a law whereby everything that is in the ground belongs to the government, not to the individuals. But some individuals who own the land, there's a certain percentage that they can benefit from the findings.
You've actually sold me Uganda today.
Okay. Well,
I think you've done a good commercial job.
You are very welcome. Karibu, we say in the Swahili word. Yes. You're welcome. Anytime.
I will take you up on that. Yes. I think Aftv Uganda is coming up next. We actually have an office in Uganda.
Okay.
We have a director in Uganda. Yes. I should be going there.
No, I wish you all the best also with African TV and the magazine, because I think you're doing a lot of good by bringing the message to the larger public in the areas that you're working in. And that's very important, because Africa is still very much misunderstood for the wrong things, always the negative things about this black African continent.
Yes.
No, the Pearl of Africa will shine again.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you for having me.
We will accompany you to the lunch.
Yes, wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All of you.
Well, viewers, that's how it is on this episode of The Ambassador. We have spoken about the Pearl of Africa. I will be going to Uganda, and I'll bring you more facts. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on The Ambassador.
Ebola time.
Okay, and have a toast. No, after.
present the East African Tourist Visa.